Hello and welcome to Salty About Health. My name is Dalaney Algier, and I'm here with my mom and co-host, Mary. So, Mom, why are we salty about health?
Good question. It's because both of us have had struggles, some more serious than others, and no one showed us simple ways we could jump into the driver's seat and take control.
And why are we sharing our views with our listeners?
Well, because we want our listeners to realize that it may take time, but with some simple knowledge about health, they'll be able to make a few changes and dig deeper to take control of their well being and live a more vibrant life.
That's fantastic. But right now, before we get into all of that, we just need to do some housekeeping. Here we go. This is an opinion-based podcast. This is not in any way offered as a diagnosis or treatment for any disease, illness, or infirmity for physical or mental condition or any other condition you may have. We are not doctors or practitioners of any kind. Persons needing medical care should obtain it from a medical practitioner. So, consult your practitioner before making any health decision. The opinions offered here in this podcast are ours alone. Again, we're not doctors, and the banter you're going to be listening to is our view and our view alone. Okay, that's done. We, of course, also want to have an open dialogue with our listeners. So stay tuned to the end of the episode, and we'll let you know all of the ways that we can connect. Welcome, everyone. Episode 36 is going to be an interesting one. Mom read an article on how to preserve fresh eggs and thought it would be a great thing to share with our listeners.
That's right, Delaney. I had never heard of preserving fresh eggs before, and I thought we have just got to share this with our listeners. In fact, there is an old joke that states the best way to keep an egg fresh is to keep it in the chicken. Oh, that reminds me, Delaney. Tell them the story of your Vietnamese friend from where you used to work that brought you in a delicacy from his country for you to try. Wasn't it a hard boiled egg with a baby chicken in it and you ate it?
Oh my gosh. So he's from the Philippines.
Oh, whoops.
It's okay. But so I know a lot of people have heard of the 100-year-old egg. It is not that. But instead, it's a fertilized egg that they let the chick age a little bit and then they cook it. Yep, like basically hard boil it and then they eat it. And he brought it for us to try at work. So it was me and we were interns at the time. So he brought in like 2 or 3 of them for us to try. And we each got one. And they're like big. Like I don't know if it was a chicken or a duck egg because it was like kind of bigger than a normal egg. But I was doing pretty good with it. I just couldn't eat the head because the beak was like fully formed.
That's so gross.
But then years later, because he and I both ended up working there full time, and we had another engineering intern at one point, so he brought it in for that kid and he couldn't do it.
So you took it and scarfed it right up.
No, I let my coworker eat that. I was good with the one.
Okay, so we'll get started with different ways to preserve your fresh eggs. And I think those of you who own chickens will really appreciate this information since chickens are not consistent with their laying all year long. So, this is a way to have eggs from your chickens all year around. And for your information, the article is from the Grow Network and it is linked in the show notes.
Okay. So, the first method we're going to talk about is the one that most people use, which is refrigeration, because I think that's pretty logical considering that's what we do with our fresh meat and vegetables as well. Eggs can be stored for up to 2 to 3 months at temperatures below 55 degrees Fahrenheit without having to do anything to them. But you do need to monitor the humidity. It needs to be consistently close to 75%. If the humidity levels get too low, the eggs will dry out. And if it's too high, They'll sometimes get moldy, which is gross. Also, it is important to use only clean, uncracked eggs. When a chicken lays an egg, it has a natural coating on it known as the bloom. This bloom is a layer of protection for the egg, which keeps out oxygen as well as harmful bacteria and germs. Anytime you wash or dry buff an egg, you're removing that protective outer coating, which in turn allows bacteria to more easily enter the egg, causing spoilage. So it's best not to wash the eggs that your chicken lays. Of course, in Germany, they keep their eggs in the cupboard and not in the refrigerator. But when you buy them at the market, they're not washed like they are here in the US, which we had a thing. I was talking to my friends about this a few months ago at this point. We went on a road trip, and because it was a bunch of us, I bought a giant thing of like 18 eggs for breakfast stuff, or 32. I don't know. It was a huge pack. And it didn't really fit in the cooler. But one of the girls was like, well, since they've already been refrigerated and since they're from the US, she's like, you have to keep it refrigerated, even though other places leave them out. So it's the first time I had heard of it.
Yeah, well, you were just in Germany. Did your friends, don't they usually keep them in the cupboard? Well, they do live here in the United States. Maybe
they do live in the US, and they are a city couple. So they met in New York City and lived there for a very long time. So they don't cook. So they don't have salt and pepper in their house, let alone fresh eggs. So they're not a good example.
Oh, wow.
But another German couple that we know through my husband's work, they still born and bred in Germany. Yes, they had everything in the cupboard when we went over to their house for German breakfast, and their fridge was teeny tiny because they barely put anything in it.
Yeah. Okay, so another way to preserve your eggs is to coat your eggs with mineral oil for long-term storage. Coating the egg with oil seals the shell to prevent evaporation during storage. The eggs you're going to store this way should be oiled and stored within 24 hours of being laid. This is critical. So it means that you will not be able to oil and save store-bought eggs for the long term. I have heard of folks who use store-bought eggs successfully, but the person who wrote the article has not. If you are able to, you have fresh eggs every day from your own backyard or a neighbor's backyard, then this method may be right for you. So if you can attain them easily. Mm-hmm. The process is really easy. In a clean, closed carton stored in a cool, dry place, eggs dipped in oil will keep several months. The author has kept them for a full year in the refrigerator. To properly oil your eggs, they must be at room temperature to start, anywhere from 50 to 70 Fahrenheit, and they must be dry. Be sure that your oil is free of bacteria and mold by heating it to 180 Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. Then with tongs or a slotted spoon, quickly dip the eggs one at a time in the oil. The whole dipping process takes a second or less and will not start to cook the eggs. Set the eggs aside on a metal drying rack, not on paper towels or newspaper, and let them drain for about 30 minutes. After they are completely dry, pack them away in clean, dry cartons. The author recommends storing them in the back of your refrigerator and using them within about 8 months or so. One really cool thing about preserving eggs this way is that if you love deviled eggs, you will find that your deviled eggs will turn out better. This is because the shells peel off of older eggs better when they are hard boiled, easier and quicker than they do with fresh eggs. I could debate that. The only downside is that once the eggs have been oiled, They're no longer useful for making cakes or meringues. The oiling interferes with the foaming properties of the egg whites, so they no longer whip up as well as fresh eggs. So we'll have to tell your cousin that, who makes lemon meringue pies all the time.
Such good lemon meringue pies.
Yes.
Yes. Another way to preserve eggs is to preserve them with salt. So you can go super old school, because before fridges, there was salt. First off, be sure to use only fresh eggs that you have not cleaned. If they age more than 24 hours, your chances of success diminish quite rapidly. Also, exposure to extreme heat or cold will hinder the preservation process, so keep that in mind as well. You can store the eggs in salt, but also in any other finely ground preservative you may have, such as bran, or an equal mix of finely ground charcoal and dry bran, or finely ground oats. You can also store them in finely ground plaster of Paris. Interesting. Keep in mind that you need not discard the salt or bran you use to preserve fresh eggs. After you have used the eggs that were preserved in the mix, you can go ahead and feed the salt and bran to your cattle if you have cows, or find another use for them. Next, stack the eggs and store them small side down. You can store the eggs layer upon layer, so long as you make sure that they don't touch each other or metal or wood. Be sure you have enough finely ground preservative to pack them in well. Store them in a covered container and keep it in a cool, dry place. Old timers often used a root cellar for this. However, see that you do not allow the eggs to be exposed to freezing temperatures, as this will rot the eggs very quickly. Properly prepared, these eggs will keep fresh anywhere from 8 to 10 months. In fact, people in some countries are known to have stored their eggs in this way for up to 2 years.
I think that's amazing.
That is amazing.
You don't even have to refrigerate these. I think that's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, salt. I mean, salt was like worth more than gold.
It was a currency. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And now we know why, because you could store your eggs for up to 2 years in it.
Your eggs, your meat, everything.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay, so freezing the eggs is what one person at a farmer's market suggested. It does work and it's easy to do, though many of our listeners may not have the freezer space. Freezing, I think this is a good idea too. I like this one. Freezing is the least time consuming method for long-term storage, but it is energy dependent. Still, if you do have the freezer room, you might want to give it a try. So eggs can be frozen in many different containers, such as freezer bags, mason jars, plastic containers, and ice cube trays. The frozen egg sickles perform much like the fresh version when thawed and used. To freeze, simply break the egg into a bowl, beat or push through a strainer to combine the yolks and the whites, and then pour them into your container and freeze. To save space, pour the eggs into an ice cube tray, and once frozen, remove them from the tray and place in a freezer bag. So as a guide, remember that 1 egg cube is approximately 1 egg. So, and also 3 tablespoons of frozen egg equals 1 thawed whole fresh egg. And 2 tablespoons of frozen egg white thawed equals 1 fresh egg white, and 1 tablespoon of frozen yolk thawed equals 1 fresh egg yolk. And the beauty of freezing eggs in smaller amounts, such as in an ice cube tray, is that they quickly thaw and allow one to, like just quickly throw together a meal. So between quiches, frittatas, and even breakfast for dinner, you are never at a loss for a great egg-based meal. I think I really like that idea, because that's something I could do. Just, put them in the ice cube trays, take them out, put them in a container in the freezer. And then when you have guests or whatever, you have eggs. So you don't have to worry about it.
You could, because there's so many, I feel like there's so many things that you can like freeze or ice cubify and then eat later. So you could have a whole meal just like pop out of your freezer really quickly.
That's a good thing.
So, making homemade powdered eggs is a great long term storage option for using minimal space. So powdered eggs may not sound very appealing. Mom says, especially for those who have served in the military. I would also like to point out, especially for those who have eaten at a college dining hall.
There you
Uh,
go.
but when reconstituted, they have a taste and texture very similar to the fresher frozen eggs. And it's kind of cool to try at home as like a DIY project. So you can beat the eggs together and dry them, or dry the whites and yolks separately. Reconstituted eggs can be used the same as fresh eggs. You can use the dried egg whites to make a very nice fluffy meringue for your lemon meringue pie.
Mm.
The author of the article dried a dozen eggs and blended them into crumbles, and they fit into a 12-ounce mason jar. That would be 4 dozen dehydrated eggs per quart jar, which is a super use of limited pantry space. So you can use the powdered eggs as follows: 1 tablespoon of powdered egg plus 1 tablespoon of hot water equals 1 egg. So here's how you dehydrate those eggs. You line up the trays of your dehydrator with parchment or wax paper, folding up all the edges to form a tray so the liquid egg doesn't slide off and make a mess. Break the eggs and stir to combine, or separate them and dry the whites and yolks in 2 different trays. Slowly pour the eggs onto the tray, moving your bowl around so as not to pool them in the middle. You can also use a spoon to spread the eggs to the very edge of each tray. You will want a very thin layer so that it dries evenly. Dehydrate at 135 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours or until no moisture is left. It takes about 6 hours for a dozen eggs on one tray to fully dehydrate, depending on your dehydrator. If you have Mom's spaceship, you can fit a lot in there.
Yes.
Stir the eggs about halfway through, or a skin will form on the top and outside edges. Once dried, crumble the eggs up and store them in a jar with a tight-fitting lid, or grind or blend the crumbs into a powder. To use, reconstitute with hot water and then cook as normal. When using the eggs for baking, simply add the powdered eggs with the dry ingredients and add the same amount of water with the wet ingredients.
Okay, so there you are. Easy ways to preserve the bounty that your hens or your neighbor's hens provide you. I can't wait to hear our listeners' comments on their favorite way to preserve eggs and to let us know what tactics they tried and if they were successful.
So let's leave our listeners with the perfect way to hard boil an egg according to the Grow Network, which, even if it's perfectly hard boiled, sadly, Delaney will not eat it because I don't like hard boiled eggs.
Aw. Do you like deviled eggs?
Nope, those are worse. For perfect hard boiled eggs, put them in a pot of water, bring it up to a boil, and then turn off the heat and cover the pot. Leave the eggs in the covered pot for 17 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of the eggs. Then replace the hot water with cold water to cool the eggs quickly. Cooling quickly prevents the green ring around the yolk that comes from overheating. Sulfur in the egg white reacts with iron from the egg yolk to produce a film of ferrous sulfide on the yolk's surface. This green layer is harmless, may not be appealing unless you want green eggs and ham.
Well, there you go. Also, another way that I learned that I do it, and it's really easy, is you put the eggs in the cold water and you bring it to a boil and then you simmer it for 7 minutes.
Mhm.
And then as soon as then you turn it off and you drain them and then put them in a cold water bath and then put them in the fridge.
Okay.
I think that cold water is important. I think it just
Mhm.
stops everything. And so you don't get the green.
Yeah.
I love it because it's kind of like when you pick out the perfect avocado, when you make hard boiled eggs and there's no green.
Yeah.
It's
Just like,
amazing. And they're real pretty.
yes,
Yeah. You
nailed
bite
it.
into the yolk and it's a beautiful yellow. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And again, we want to hear from you guys. We always want to hear from you guys. Please, please, please reach out to us. And here are just a few ways that you can do that. You can reach out via Instagram and Facebook. Find us at Salty About Health. Even Snapchat at Salty Health. You can email us at saltyabouthealth@gmail.com. Or if you just want to find all that in one place, check out our website, saltyabouthealth.com. We've got all the ways for you to listen and connect there. And finally, if you like what you hear today, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. We really appreciate it. So, Mom, if they want to hear from you on social media, where can they find you?
Okay, I am a certified health coach and I do coach one-on-one. So if you're interested, you can contact me at mary@feedyourselfhealthy.com. I also do research for people who are interested in finding alternative approaches to do in conjunction with the health issue or illness their doctor is treating them for. So again, just reach out to me at mary@feedyourselfhealthy.com.
And of course, I'll be the one mainly keeping an eye on the social media. So always happy to chat with you guys via the Salty Network. Also, just want to shout out our intro and outro music. It is by Yule, and you can find her at www.yulearts.com. That's EULARTS. You can also find her on Instagram at Yule_arts or Spotify and YouTube. Check her out. Her piano music and everything else is amazing. And until next time, stay salty.
Stay salty.